Drearymidnightpodcast. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, they.
My name is Celeste. My pronouns are she, her.
And tonight we are discussing William Hewson,
who I don't know anything about. I really don't.
So, a few years ago, you might have heard very trumped up news articles saying, we cannot rule out the possibility that Benjamin Franklin was a serial killer because there were skeletons underneath his house he stayed in London. Ben Franklin wasn't a serial killer. William Hewson is responsible for those bodies.
Oh my god.
Let's get into it. Intro music.
Intro music. Also, we just became Pokemon Go friends.
Yeah, so that is, in fact, the most exciting update.
That's what's on our minds right now.
Yeah,
There's just been a resurgence of Pokemon Go lately.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'm not mad at it.
Yeah. But, so we just established you don't know anything about William Hewson.
That name does not ring any bells. Honestly, I didn't even know Ben Franklin had skeletons under his house.
Okay, so...
This is all new to me.
So, first of all, it wasn't his house. He was renting a flat on Craven Street in London.
Okay.
And his landlady's son-in-law, William Hewson, is often called the father of hematology, which is like the study of blood. Mm-hmm. I think he helped map the vascular system, and according to Wikipedia, he also isolated fibrin and identified evidence for the existence of a cell membrane.
Okay. Well, that's not as fun knowing probably how he studied that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those where it's sort of both above and below board, right?
Okay.
So the bodies got there because he was running an anatomy lab in the backyard. Thing was, how does one map the vascular system and study the potential for existence of cell membranes in the 1700s?
There's no x-rays. There's no x-rays.
Cadavers is the answer. And so, literally, cadavers are the answer. Thing is, cadavers, dead people. A cadaver trade in any capacity is illegal in 1700s London. What do you do with a body that's supposed to be buried anywhere else? And that you obtain through potentially illegal means?
You bury it somewhere where nobody can find it and prove that you obtained it by illegal means.
Exactly. So according to Discover magazine, bones were first discovered in the late 1990s. It was during the time when the Craven Street home was doing conservation repairs. It's now called the Benjamin Franklin House.
Okay.
It's a house museum in London. Been there too. Really, really cool. Do you have
any pictures of you in there?
I'm sure I do.
You gotta look for them.
Yeah. But I don't know if I have a photo of me there, but I have a photo of...
the bodies.
Not the bodies. They don't put the bodies on display. But, so that's the only photo I have inside the Ben Franklin house in London. Back to Discover magazine. But they found a pit that was apparently 1 meter wide and 1 meter deep and had more than 1,200 bone fragments belonging to at least 15 individuals when they were doing the digs in the 1990s.
15 is a lot more and yet a lot less than what I expected.
Yeah, because on the one hand, it's like, how do you fit that many bones into like your back garden? Because this is like a row house in London, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming that there wasn't a lot of space.
Correct.
Just especially looking at, like, I don't know, the size of those little houses, you know?
Yeah, they're tiny, right? And there's not a lot of like garden space. So on the one hand, it's impressive that you got the bones of 15 people. On the other hand, again, dissection was illegal. So the anatomy school was also illegal. It's sort of like it's impressive that you were able to teach a bunch of people over the course of only 15 bodies, right?
Like, how long did he use these bodies before he retired them?
And how long can you use a body for a dissection?
Especially when you don't have the means to keep it preserved. Like, nowadays, you can keep a body preserved way longer than you could in, like, the 1700s.
Yeah, in the 1700s, yeah. Yeah, it's impressive that he was able to teach that much. The connection with William Hewson and Benjamin Franklin is alluded to. Franklin was living there on 36 Craven Street until 1790. So, like, he left during the Revolution and then came back.
Yeah.
And was living there for, like, 15, 18 years before, from 1757 to 1775. So, right in the lead up to the American Revolution. According to people at the Benjamin Franklin House, dissection wasn't fully legal until the 19th century, so end of the 1800s. And it was growing because we didn't really have microscopes.
Do you know why dissection wasn't legal?
I'm sure there is some moral component to it. That said, I don't know what the moral component would have been.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, like, they're already dead. Yeah. I guess it would be like, we don't want you desecrating these bodies because of like religious rituals and stuff. Like, people probably want to bury their dead intact.
Well, that, and then there were likely a lot of religious beliefs about keeping a body a certain kind of way to get to a certain kind of afterlife, and you don't want body snatchers or anybody else to interfere with that.
Yeah. Was he a body snatcher? I'm assuming he was, but
so that's the thing.
Do you know how he snatched those bodies?
So that's the thing. There's no official evidence saying whether or not Hewson was a body snatcher, to my knowledge. That said, he probably at least paid body snatchers occasionally. Because how else do you get 15 bodies to your back garden, right? Unless there's something else that Hewson needed to tell everybody.
Oh, God.
But the connection with Franklin and Hewson is that Franklin was living on Craven Street. And he was renting a room from William Hewson's future mother-in-law. And
future mother-in-law.
Yeah. They got married so William Hewson got married to Mary Stevenson, better known as Polly, in July of 1770. So a few years before Benjamin Franklin had to leave because, he's an American and a war is going on. But starting in September of 1772, he ran the anatomy school out of Craven Street. And according to this article via Wikipedia, in 1998, they're doing restoration, and they dug out the remains of at least 6 children for adults below the home.
Oh, no. I didn't think there would be children.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yikes, indeed.
Now I kind of hope that it was body snatching and not serial killer thingies.
Yeah. And according to this quote, initial estimates are that the bones are about 200 years old and were buried at the time that Franklin was living in the house, which was his home. Sorry, I got the dates wrong earlier. His home from 1757 to 1762, and then again from 1764 to 1775. Most of the bones show signs of having been dissected, sawn, or cut. One skull had been drilled with several holes. And
I guess that makes sense if it's a medical thing.
Yes. And again, according to that Discover magazine article, many of the bones had distinctive cut marks on them. Femurs were cut in a specific way, likely as an aid to teach students about amputation. And it's a good skill to know if you want to, like, in general, if you're going into the medical profession, but especially if you're going to be a surgeon. And
you want to be able to know how to amputate someone without further trauma.
Yeah. And kind of elaborating on the skull holes situation. So if you don't want to hear about skull holes, skip forward a few minutes.
Skull hole.
Well,
sounds
so
like
this
a
something
band name.
Yeah. If you create the band Skull Holes, please give us royalties.
Yes.
Anyway, so the skull holes had the holes were very even and like circular, not necessarily from trauma, likely from what was called a trepanning device. It was a tool to make circular holes in the skull.
I think I know what you're talking about.
The practice was believed to relieve pressure in the brain, and the fact that they existed showed that they're practicing and or teaching surgery instead of trying to be a serial killer.
Yeah. That was like a method to relieve pressure because they thought that was one of the like humors and stuff, right?
Yeah. Or brain swelling might have been a source for migraines or something. So when we mentioned body snatching earlier, for those of y'all who might not know what that is, also, welcome back to the skull hole, people.
Let's talk about body snatching.
So, if you've never heard about body snatching before, often in the case like William Hewson, especially for people like William Hewson, who were trying to study and teach about the body and what better way to train than on the actual thing that you're going to be working with.
Yeah.
There was a demand for actual training and more doctors and so on. Scotland was a great place to study, but if you're not going to go to Scotland, you're going to go to London. And there's a demand and not necessarily a supply of readily available bodies, because at that time and place in history, likely the only people who are going to have the option to give their bodies to science are convicted criminals who are hanged. And so even then it's more about like, let's see if there's any odd thing about this person in particular. It's like, it's probably not the best way to find out about this person in particular after they're dead. But
yeah, it probably won't. If they find like a tumor in their stomach, that probably doesn't explain why they're a murderer.
Correct. Yeah. And so there's terms like body snatchers or resurrectionists.
Oh.
Where they would go into graveyards or any other places where people are recently buried and dig up the bodies and then sell them to people like William Hewson. William Hewson probably wasn't like the biggest payer. The actual big medical schools would have been the biggest payers.
Maybe. Here's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
If body snatching and working with cadavers was legal,
it hardly was. But
yeah, I mean, I'm assuming, because I was gonna say, how did the big medical things get away with it? But now I'm thinking, probably just money.
Yeah. So resurrectionists, again, according to this Discover magazine article, resurrectionists was a euphemism for the grave diggers who would retrieve the bodies. All other times, anatomists might have made arrangements with a hangman. In any case, it's not completely clear where specific human remains would have come from, because, and this is me going off here, because there's so much dubious legality about the retrieval of a body, especially for science, that you're not gonna write down that you
there's not like a written record.
Correct. I mean, like with Burke and Hare, who are some of the most, I think there's Burke and Hare, with some of the more famous resurrectionists, they there wasn't really a written record that they did sell these people to this school or whatever, but the pair that I'm thinking of was struggling with money, and the med schools pay out.
Yeah.
And they started going around with much nicer clothing than someone who's struggling with money would have been able to afford. Like the brand new high-end kind of things, which is like, don't tell on yourself like that. But
well, that's too. And the medical schools, like, they obviously didn't get any repercussion? Is that right?
Repercussions, yeah.
Yeah, for
buying all the bodies. Yeah.
So it was like illegal, but not really.
Yeah. And with it's like a lot of other things. It's illegal higher than a certain threshold of budget.
Yeah.
But William Hewson himself, born 1939, not 1939, 1739.
I was going to say, wow, this was so much more recent than I thought.
Yeah, Ben Franklin lived so much longer than you thought, right? But yeah, born in November 1739. One of 11 children, but because, again, it's the 1730s, not everybody's going to survive to adulthood, as was the case with Hewson. When he's 20, he moves to London and studies under William and John Hunter. William Hunter is actually interesting because he started obstetrics as like a medical science rather than just a midwives thing. Kind of mixed feelings about it because it's like you're taking the accumulated knowledge of people who are actually practicing and kind of have figured out what's best, and then slapping your, I don't know, white cis scientific hands on it.
But at the same time, that's probably what gave it credence.
Yeah, that's true.
In the first place.
That's true.
Like, because if it went this long without,
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag. And 1769, according to the Benjamin Franklin House, in 1769, Hewson was awarded the Copley Medal, but he was not admitted into the Royal Society until 1770. And the Copley Medal, was initially awarded for the most important scientific discovery or the greatest contribution made by experiment. It did not say what he got the medal for.
Blood.
Well, blood, probably. Presumably.
I do love that they're giving medals to this guy. Like, wow, he figured this stuff out.
Yeah.
With no knowledge of human anatomy.
Nope.
He did not cut into any bodies.
0 bodies were affected.
0 bodies were harmed, but he just knows how blood works.
Yep. How else is one supposed to figure out a cell membrane without cutting in to a body? We don't know, but he sure did.
This guy did it, yeah. Oh, Willie here.
Yep. But irony of ironies. Hewson dies in May of 1774.
Uh-oh.
He got sepsis, a blood condition, while dissecting a cadaver.
Do you think he contracted it himself, because of the amount of blood that he worked with?
I mean...
Does that work like that?
I don't know.
Okay, let me look up how sepsis works.
But
all the nurses and doctors who listen to this podcast are cringing.
Yes. So stop cringing. Please write us an email. Please meet your rage a little bit, but still send us a gentle corrections drearymidnightpodcast at gmail.com. But yeah, it's just I don't know, because I feel like that's gut feeling says. Non-scientific gut feeling, mind you, but non-scientific gut feeling says that's not necessarily how sepsis works.
Yeah.
Because he'd been working with cadavers for like a decade until that point, right? So...
How do you get sepsis? This is Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
Hold on. It's telling me symptoms, but it's not telling me... Oh, causes. Any type of infection can lead to sepsis. This includes bacterial, viral, or fungal infections. Those that are more commonly cause sepsis include infections of lungs, such as pneumonia, kidney, bladder, and other parts of the urinary system, digestive system, bloodstream, catheter sites, wounds, or burns. Risk factors: people over the age of 65, which I don't think he wasn't.
He was like 40.
Infancy, not that.
No.
People with lower immune response, such as those being treated for cancer, people with HIV, people with chronic diseases such as diabetes, kidney disease, or chronic COPD, chronic obstruction pulmonary disease. Yes. Admission to intensive care unit or longer hospital stays, devices that go in the body such as catheters in the vein or breathing tubes, treatment with antibiotics in the last 90 days, and a condition that requires treatment with corticosteroids, which can lower immune system response. So, I don't think he did any of those. Unless he had some chronic disease that we didn't know about.
Yeah. I mean, from what I saw, it doesn't say. That said, it's still sort of like...
I mean, it was the 1770s. They probably didn't know.
Yeah, it's 1774. Like, how are you going to track
if somebody has a chronic disease.
Yeah. Oh, and I said, oh yeah, he was like 40. No, he dies aged 34. Which is young. Yeah, like real young. Like
that's like I'm 4 years away from being that age.
Yeah, right. It's wild. Wild that he was able to do so many foundational things in such a short time as well. Like especially such a short time of being an adult.
This is so sad. Yeah. Sepsis may cause atypical blood clotting. And it basically you don't get as much blood as you can. This is just such an ironic death for him.
Irony of ironies, right?
And I don't honestly. This might be a controversial take. I don't think he was really doing anything wrong. Yeah, he wasn't like you probably should get bodies from people who consent to having their body used for science.
But there was no option to consent to put your body through that.
The research that he did was way. It led to a lot more understanding of how the human body worked without having to do war crimes right or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And identifying the existence of a cell membrane in the 1770s, that's impressive. Yeah. And he also correctly identified that the blood cell is shaped like a disc. Oh my god. Whereas before they were assuming it's shaped like a sphere or like a ball. And doing all of that, presumably somewhat literally under the table in some instances, and mapping the lymphatic system, and without all hypothesizing about the lymphatic system rather,
without all the technology and stuff that
right
we have now.
Exactly. It's wild that he was able to do all of that without much of a microscope, if at all. And without having easy access to blood in any capacity. Yeah. Right?
But Jeez Louise. Right. Oh, when you first told me that it was the same house that Ben Franklin lived in, I thought it was going to be oh yeah, he lived in this house, and then he moved out, and this guy went in this house. No, but it was
they were living there at the same time for a couple of years. Yeah, it was wild.
But now it's less of a weird, creepy serial killer story, and more of a look at this marvel of medicine that had to be obtained by some shady methods.
Yeah, and we could do an entire episode on body snatchers as in general, because I'm sure he had to work with them, given the amount of research he would have had to do.
I don't think he's just waiting for someone to cross the street and drop dead.
Yeah. I mean, he could be, and that would be much more of an interesting story, but then these Wikipedia articles would have been so much longer, right? But with that, even, there could be a paper trail if he was, convicted, right? Yeah. And to my knowledge, I didn't look into this, and I didn't think to look into this until... we're talking about it now, but to my knowledge, there's not really any newspaper articles of the Craven Street Killer or anything like that, right? It's not really a...
Well, it seems like it wasn't even discovered until
1998.
Later. Exactly. Yeah. Until the 20th century.
Well, I mean, shout out to William Hewson for somehow being able to be super
for being very smart.
For being super smart. So it's going to be a shorter episode today, which I'm not mad at. But
it was an interesting episode, though.
Very short, super interesting. We'll probably do tourism tales for Patreon this time. So go abroad and... Go abroad and go to London to the Benjamin Franklin House. That's where I first learned about this. If you want to correct us on any medical things we might have misinformed you about.
100% we misinformed.
Yeah. We probably missed at least a couple things. So shoot us an email, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com, if you would like to support us with money, hear more tourism tales of... terrible things. Support us on Patreon with money at patreon.com/drearymidnight.
If any of you are tour guides, send us your
email
tourism tales. So we can have more content for our Patreon.
Yeah. Episode 1 was the time that 2 people in the same week thought I was pregnant. Episode 2 is probably going to be like call center tales, where like people called in and wanted to talk to like the CEO's head of the board situation, and like, ma'am, you're talking to someone who makes minimum wage. And
I mean, I could have so many if we opened this up to like retail, but then it wouldn't be like on brand. But boy howdy, there is nothing like the wrath of a older aged woman at Joann's.
Oh yeah,
I'll say that.
Yeah.
You're a knitter, you understand.
You interacted.
You've interacted with people like that.
Yeah. If you don't want to support us with money, please leave us a review.
Share our podcast with your friends.
Families, family. Your cousin's dog's neighbor's dog. Or leave us a review. 5 stars ideally, but anyway, give us words help us in the algorithm. So leave us your sparkling water review, that weird diagnosis.
Today we are drinking Bellevue.
Bellevue, the oldie
Pure
house.
Aqua.
It's the blackberry oldie house brand. But with all that promotion, Instagram. Follow us on Instagram at drearymidnightpod. Send us your tourism tales there too if you want. And with all that said, be careful with cadavers. Don't steal them without prior written consent. Ideally when the person is alive. And
beware of sepsis.
Just beware of sepsis. Don't get sepsis. And safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.
Good night.